Ashley, just let me know when we're ready. Yeah.
The meeting is now live streaming and you can start whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you. All right, our Cuyahoga County Council Committee of the Whole meeting for Thursday, June 17, 2021 is now called to order. Ashley, would you please call the roll?
It's Andrea. Calling the roll.
It's early, I apologize.
That's okay. Calling the roll, Mr. Juma,
Here.
Mr. Gallagher,
Here.
Mr. Schran,
Here.
Ms. Conwell. Ms. Conwell is absent at the moment. Ms. Brown. Ms. Brown will be joining us shortly. Ms. Stevens. Ms. Stevens is absent at the moment. Ms. Simon.
I'm here.
Thank you. Ms.
You're
Baker.
welcome. Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Sweeney.
Present.
Council President Jones.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Andrea. Has anyone signed in for public comment?
No, Mr. President, we did not receive any public comment.
Right. All right. Well, again, welcome to today's confirmation hearing in which council will consider the appointment of Ronald Andrew Johnson as our Chief Information Officer. For a little background, the Department of IT was established by ordinance in 2012 under the direction of our county executive. The hearing process will proceed as follows. The nominee will be offered an opportunity to address his qualifications, motivations for seeking the position, and his outlook and plans regarding the office. Council members will then be offered the opportunity to ask questions of the nominee. We will do so in rounds, allowing each council member to ask 2 questions per round until all questions have been answered. Once all questions have been answered, we will entertain a motion to recommend that council approve or reject the nomination at the next regular meeting. If we're not ready to act on that motion today, we will defer making the recommendation. Assuming a motion to recommend approval or rejection has been made, council will vote on that recommendation at its next regular meeting. Thank you, and let's begin. Andrea, would you please read the item into the record?
Resolution 2021-0148, confirming the county executive's appointment of Ronald Andrew Johnson upon his taking the oath of office as Chief Information Officer.
All right. Well, again, Mr. Johnson, welcome.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. This is quite an honor and quite an experience, I have to say. So thank you for the opportunity.
All right, well, it's good having you here, and congratulations on getting to this point in the process. And I would just like to turn the floor over to you to present.
Well, thank you very much. And I would first off like to express my gratitude to Armin and Bill and the executive team, as well as the selection committee, to get me to this point, to get me this nomination, and very, very thrilled and very honored and humbled. I also want to thank the council members that are in attendance today. I really appreciate the time. I know how busy you all are. Cuyahoga is a complicated, big county, and I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you to Trevor, Tiffany, who helped me along the way to make it here. So thank you to everybody. You know, I'm hopeful that this conversation, I can earn your confidence and receive the confirmation for the Chief Information Officer for Cuyahoga County, and looking forward to the conversation. So I'll start off by giving you a little overview, adding a little commentary to the resume that I don't know that you have. So one may ask, how did I end up in Cleveland, Ohio, growing up in Michigan and then attending Purdue University in the middle of Indiana? And it's a rather odd story. I graduated with an industrial management, industrial engineering degree from Purdue, and was interviewing with Arthur Andersen, which is an accounting firm for, to tell you how old I am, actually, an old time accounting firm. And you may ask, well, why would an industrial engineer interview with an accounting firm? And that accounting firm was starting their consulting business. And it sounded very interesting. It was New Frontier, and that consulting business really revolved around IT. It revolved around implementation of systems, ERP systems, payroll systems, what have you. They flew me to Cleveland for the interview, and I'm probably one of the last persons to stay at the Holiday House and to eat at the Theatrical Grill before those were shuttered. So again, gives you a little context of of where I'm coming from. But I fell in love with Cleveland at that point. Accepted the opportunity with Arthur Andersen, moved to Lakewood, Ohio, on the Gold Coast, had a small little dingy apartment, and really haven't strayed far from that spot, other than a brief year in Bay Village. Spent 30 years in Lakewood. My experience with, as I mentioned, with Arthur Andersen was a lot around systems implementation, around ERP implementations. And, as you get them as a college grad, this is all new world, right? This is the forefront in the late 80s, early 90s. These things are happening, and we're learning about how to implement these. And as a young staff consultant, I was thrown into some crazy situations, some big ERPs and very small ERP implementations. When my time at Andersen came to an end, I formed a couple of consulting firms to carry on. My interest, my background in ERP and IT led me to create these firms. One was very small, with me being the only member throughout about 30 years. The second one grew a little bit larger. It had about 30 employees. And again, we were focused on IT systems implementation, ERPs, payrolls, that sort of thing. And, I kept a 30-year career going with that, and, never did advertising, never, did a lot of marketing. And I think back, and I've been asked, how did you manage to make 30 years kind of as a single shingle? And it really was trust. And I think what happened is that I got into companies, I produced results, and I earned the trust of those companies. I don't have a huge portfolio of companies that I could call on, but those that I did found me to be a valuable resource. And you'll hear about trust, I think, as we go through this conversation. So, at around 2012, I, still as a consultant, but as really a contract to hire situation, I joined a company called A. Schulman. And that's where I really had my first taste of, in the corporate world, of running a department. And that time we probably had about 100 employees that were both contractors and internal employees inside of the applications department. And we did all kinds of mergers. I don't know if you're familiar with A. Schulman, but they were in a real buying spree in the 2010 timeframe, 2012. And I was in charge of merging those, of converting ERPs, SAP to Oracle, SAP to Infor, Infor to Infor, a variety of applications. At about 2016, Schulman was being acquired. And it just so happened at that time I was being recruited into Progressive Insurance. They had struck a deal with a company called Emerald Consulting to bring in some, I guess I would say, not tooting my own horn here, but some top program management. And I was brought in as part of the enterprise portfolio management team at Progressive Insurance. There was about 20 of us. And I will say that Progressive, those 3 years, 2.5 years that I spent at Progressive, were hugely influential. Progressive is just such a jewel of a company for Northeast Ohio. And again, I'll mention them probably in response to some questions later on. About 2019, then I received a call from some old acquaintances asking me to come down to Diebold Nixdorf, which was in the process of a digital transformation. And I reported directly to what they called the chief digital officer. And I still do, as a matter of fact. And that was brought in to oversee the company's largest digital programs. And they had a variety of endeavors going on, some growth related, some foundational, and some cost reduction related. And I was in charge overseeing all three of these areas. And still to this day, that is my role with the company. And one that may be of interest to you is our ERP implementation. It is a rather large multi-million dollar endeavor where I have about 400 internal, external individuals reporting into that program in various capacities, not all full-time, but various capacities. And so that has been obviously something you may be interested in and has had lots of trials and tribulations. We're fighting through the COVID, the impact that had on the program, and truly managing such a transformative program. The program was expanded under my watch. We have included a couple of items such as HCM, which is our human capital management, as well as another product called CPQ, Configure Price Quote. Doesn't have a lot of meaning in the government world, but HCM being folded into our program. All right, so that is a quick one breath elevator speech on my background, what I've done, my qualifications. But Mr. President, if I could have just a moment to give some background on and maybe some foundational information on my view that I think will answer some of the questions that were submitted. And I promise I won't drone on. I promise I will keep this very light and brief, but I think it will give you a good idea of who I am, what my view is, and what my approach will be once, hopefully, I receive the confirmation. And those, Mr. President.
Go right ahead.
All right, thank you. So there are really two areas that I'd like to focus on. And the first is the elephant in the room, right? The ERP program. And, I've received some specific questions. I've had the opportunity to talk to a few of the council members, and I want to stay away from giving specific responses to questions. And they are very valid questions that I would be asking. But I want to be fair in this situation. I have a lot of investigation to do. I have a lot of learning to do. And I want to be sure that I'm talking fact-based. And so I want to stay away from some specifics, but I will give you my methodology and I'll give you what I plan to do starting day one of when I start the job for Chief Information Officer. And with the ERP, there are really, I think, I was asked the question, what went wrong, right? What's going wrong? And I said, I don't want to get into specifics of, say, the ERP of Harris, but what I see throughout my career and where I've been brought in is, I would say, really about 11 items that come to mind as to where a problem can happen. Two are almost, I'll say it, they're obvious to say, objective and scope, right? Have we met the objective and do we have the scope? And do we all agree on what that objective and what that scope is? Many times I find that we have different people not quite understanding or not quite agreeing on what the objective or scope is. One of the first things we're going to flesh out, what is our target we're aiming for? How do we define success on these programs? But the next two, I think, deserve a little more, they're more complicated. And what I see time and time again is resources being an issue. And what I mean by that is, first of all, do we have enough resources? Do we have the right skill set? Do they have the right support, and do they have the right availability? And do we have people assigned to the project that have to complete their daytime job as well? Are they doing double duty? That can not only be a problem for the program, but suffer burnout. Something I'll be taking a hard look at and right sizing, working with my peers inside of the county to make sure that we give these folks a chance to succeed. We don't suffer the burnout. But it's also more than just our county employees, right? In my view, I think we have to look at our vendor. We have to look at our system integrator. How are their resources? Are they engaged properly? Do we have the best? Do we have the appropriate vendor resources? Again, I don't know what the situation is, but something I will be taking a very close look at. On resources, last couple things I'll say about that is our management engaged? Do we have the right, and I come from the business, so I'll call them L3s, L4s, those lieutenants, those junior lieutenants in the county, do we have the right engagement? Because if we don't have the right engagement there, do we not have their skin in the game, this suddenly becomes an IT project. And it's cliche to say, but IT projects this is not an IT project. This is a county project, and we need to have that level of engagement across the administration. We need your engagement, the council's engagements on this. All right, I feel like I'm droning on a little bit here, so I'll pick up the pace just a touch. Change management is the other area, though, that I think is a key spot where companies fail. If we get the product right, it does everything we say it does. It performs we say it does. It meets all of our objectives. Is the county ready for the change? And I see time again, private sector, not enough is devoted to change management. It's an afterthought. That cannot be an afterthought. We are changing people's day-to-day lives inside the county. And is the county employee ready for this change? Something I see and we'll be taking a very close look at. Vendor promises. This is my fifth point that I wanted to talk about. What did the vendor promise? I'm dying to get my hands on the contracts and understand when this was decided years and years ago, before many of us were here, what did the vendor promise and are they delivering that? And when I think of the vendor, I think of the software and I think of the implementer. Are they living up to the promise? And if not, what are we going to do about it? Schedule. Some of these are easy to think about. Do we have the right schedule? Is it appropriate? What is our budget? I know it's a bit hot topic, and I know there's varying opinions on that. Something I have to get my arms around. Is it appropriate? Is it going to lead us on a path to success? Governance. Do we have the right governance in place? How do we handle changes? There's problems. How do we handle those problems? Do we have the right support there? Project methodology. How is our project methodology? Do we have the tools in place that can measure our progress and give us the early indication that something is going astray? I've committed to Bill, I've committed to Armand that I am going to do my best that there are no surprises. And these early indicators on how the program are going from a metric standpoint are critical. Have to understand what those are and how are we using those. Let's look at the ERP functionality, the configuration. Does it meet our needs? Does it meet our expectations? Years ago, we thought it did. Is that still the case? And then data migration. One thing that's a little pet peeve of mine, every system implementation, I don't care if it's county, I don't care if it's business, you hear the complaint, oh, we have bad data. Well, yes, get over it, right? We have bad data. That's why we're doing an ERP implementation. That's why we're doing these things, because our data is not reliable. There are only a handful of things that we can do when we have bad data. We can't sit around and complain about it. We identify it, we fix it, and we move on. So those are the that is the methodology I will follow with our ERP program and be able to deliver answers to not only the administration, but to yourselves as well as to how the program is tracking and what are we going to do about it. But I also want to take just a moment to talk about the role of CIO and looking at, my first 100 days, right? I know it's a very popular phrase inside of the political world, but what do I want to accomplish in those first 100 days? Because while ERP is out there, and while in some of your words, it's a disaster, right? I don't know that to be the case, but we'll figure that out. Those are solvable problems. But the CIO role has so much more than that, right? And I think there are two that come to mind that are not solvable. And the first is security. We can't stand anywhere and say, yep, we've solved our security problem. We'll never solve it, right? We have to be vigilant. And you all read the papers, you all see what's happening. We are, as a government body, we are a target. And we will never solve the security problem, but we can mitigate it and we can recover from it. And we have to make sure that we understand that. Part of my role as CIO is to make sure that we are in the right spot, that we are prepared, and we are doing everything we possibly can to avoid this. Because it's going to happen. We're going to have attacks. We're going to have breaches, and we need to make sure that we're on top of this. And if we have a significant breach, nothing else matters. And so, as CIO, something I'll be highly, highly focused on. Second thing, organizational, right? One of the first things when I was reading about ERP is thinking about, my gosh, the team members, what are they feeling? How motivated? They must be so demoralized. They must be so just frustrated, right? And we have to get our arms around the organizational and understand the IT team, the care of the IT team. What is their attitude? Are we recognizing their achievements? Are we supporting them with proper training? Are we giving them opportunities for advancement? Are we considering diversity? Are we considering inclusion? These types of things, in my first 100 days, I'm not going to have the answer, but I'll have the plan for those answers. Project delivery, obviously, something we have to take a very hard look at as a team. We have to understand what are the stakeholder expectations. Look at my peers, further deep dive with Bill and Armin's view on how we run the administration and support them in that. Then we get into some really a little bit more tactical things, administrative, right? Go out, introduce myself, in those first 100 days, get out there, let people know, hey, there is leadership. Yes, I'm engaged. Yes, I'm here. Open door, right? We'll talk. We'll be meeting people, but not only internal team, but we'll be looking at key vendors, key partners that we have, and meeting them and understand, yes, the Cuyahoga County has a leader, and that is me, and I am out here, and I'm here to meet you. We start developing our strategy. We start developing our governance on how do we prioritize projects. When we say we can do something, how do we make sure that we can do it? How do we make sure that it fits within the overall administration council priority? Then we get into things like contracts and procurement, truly understanding what our vendors have promised and are they delivering? And if they're not, what are we going to do about it? Holding them accountable to these deals that have been struck. Operational, talking about, hey, how do we deliver our service? What are our roles and responsibilities in our operation? What are we doing with our infrastructure? What are we doing with our application? Do we truly have our operations in order? And then finally, end user, customer care. How are we servicing those that rely on the IT department? Every time we have a problem, is it a wild goose chase? We don't know who's supporting. We don't know where to go. We need to make those answers. We need to make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable, that we have SLAs in place, that we can serve the people for the people that make things happen, right? IT is a support organization. We need to support those folks that are making things happen. So covered a lot of ground. That CIO role, that 100-day plan, I view it as a plan to plan. I'm not going to walk out with the answers, but I walk out with a plan. I'm going to walk out with our weaknesses, walk out with our strengths, and we'll adjust. We'll be transparent about it. We'll be accountable for it, and we will happily be sharing that information. So, Mr. President, I appreciate the time. Maybe that's one of the longer opening statements you've had, and I apologize for that. But I absolutely appreciate the opportunity, and I'm happy to field any questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Johnson. I thought it was very succinct and insightful. So what I'm going to do now is turn this over to my colleagues. We will, again, as I said earlier, 2 questions per round, and let's begin. Do we have any? Who would like the first question?
Yes, Mr. President.
Councilman Miller, our Chair of Finance, please go forward.
Thank you very much. And first, I'd like to say congratulations on your recommendation for appointment to this very significant position that we're eager to have filled. And I'd say as far as the length of the opening presentation, it's about in the middle. So it certainly is not overly long. It's at the level of detail that we like to see. So thank you for that. And my first question is that IT departments in general, and ours in particular, have had larger than normal rates of turnover. And my question is, how do you plan to reduce turnover in the IT department and improve morale?
Yeah, so Mr. Miller, that's a very good question, and you said it right. This is a problem that's facing a lot of IT departments. It's not just a county problem, but it is a county problem, right? We have to figure out how to do that. And I mentioned trust in the beginning, and I think that when you foster a culture of trust with the team, that can go a long way. You can't talk about it, right? You have to show it. You have to earn the trust. And I think that many of the studies that I have seen, that when an employee leaves, sometimes they're leaving for more money. Yes, they sometimes may be leaving for greener pastures, but a lot of times they're leaving because of a lack of leadership. They don't know where they're going. They don't know that they're valued. They don't know how they're being measured, what their objectives are. I think that's one of the things that when I was talking about my first 100 days is to plan out, how do we make this so that the rank and file, the people that we absolutely need to do the heavy lifting here, are valued. I think that any employee, whether that be a private sector, whether that be a public sector, wants to do a good job. They want to feel needed. They want to feel like they can contribute. And I think those are elements that I can bring, that I can make that path clear and help retain. It's a problem, as I mentioned, the employee problems are never ones that are solved, right? It's something you have to be vigilant with, and you have to stay on top of it. And as society ebbs and flows and the needs and people, you can't stamp it and say, we're done. All right, we've solved our problem. It's an ongoing problem that you have to stay engaged, and you have to value those employees. So it's a lot of words, a lot of theoretical. I understand that, Mr. Miller, but that is earning that trust, I think, is at the core of that, and giving that team, a chance at success. And I think everybody wants to be successful.
So I'll just give you an FYI that we've had people leave for less money. So that tells you the level of the problem that we're dealing with. And my second question is, how long do you anticipate it taking to review the ERP project installation, and particularly how long do you expect it to take for you to be able to tell us whether you believe the planned January 2022 go live on payroll WFM installation, whether that's doable or not?
Yeah. So Dale, great and very difficult question. So as I think about that and as I contemplate those first 100 days, right? And I think we look at all the major programs that are going on, right? Workforce management and payroll, right? We also have the Harris program that we need to do this level of analysis. And in my mind, as I kind of visualize how this happens, I'm thinking at 30 days, we can at least give you something that might be, it wouldn't be 100%, it wouldn't be absolute, but maybe it's a 50% confidence level saying, yep, at 30 days, I have 50% confidence that these are on target. An additional 30 days, maybe we're looking at an 85% confidence, but it'll be very easy, Dale. It will be easy to say, what are the showstoppers, right? That will be easy. If there's something hanging out there, those will be easy to identify, and those will be things that we can present right away. I know that the council has brought in Zig, and I think that it's unfortunate that that had to happen, but I think it's an interesting twist. And some of the discussions I will have with Zig, I think can accelerate some of that analysis. Clearly, I have to meet with the team. I have to talk to Jack, and I have to talk to the various leaders in the program. But I think within 30 days, we can identify icebergs. We can identify those showstoppers. We can get us at a 50%. I think another 30 days, we can get us to an 85% confidence. But, Dale, I sound like I'm hedging my bets, and I get that. A lot can happen, right? And I would be foolish to sit here and say in 30 days, I can guarantee on January 1st, we're going live. What I can tell you is that I will be on the outlook. I will be on the lookout for icebergs. I will be giving you a level of confidence, and I will be transparent in where we're at. And as I committed to Bill, as I committed to Armin, no surprises, right? If I hear something that's going to derail, we are going to be transparent about that. Then it will happen, right? It will happen. We will have things in the next 4 months, 5 months, whatever it is, that will derail us. We have to, as a team, figure out how to get around those.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And next, any
Mr.
other
President?
questions?
Mr. President?
Councilman? Yes, Jack.
Yes, okay. So in regards to this run, you said, Mr. Johnson, you said that your 100 days, if I'm just doing a quick calculation, just say, oh, let's, for ease of purposes, July 1st is day one. That puts you at the 10th of October for your 100th day out there. And I assume, I'm not sure whether you're talking calendar days or business days, but I'll give you the faster one, which is the calendar day. And you talked about change management. Is it likely during that 100 days that people are going to be watching how you're going to be doing this analysis so that they are not going to be performing towards that target date that Dale just alluded to of going live? I mean, they're gonna want to know where you're thinking and what you're doing. So it just seems like during this 100 days, you're going to be analyzing people, facts, processes, programs, and the likelihood of people feeling that we're going to hit that target is going to get pushed off. It seems to me it's an automatic thing that's going to happen. Have you ever been involved with this kind of a situation where you're coming in with a triage at the 11th hour, getting ready with an already start date.
So, Mr. Tron, that's a very perceptive point, right? So I think it's very clear. And one of the questions that was submitted was, how hitting that target date of January. In fact, I think Mr. Miller was asking about that as well. And absolutely, we have to go in with that is the priority, right? I understand that ERP and that date is of utmost important. I've had the opportunity to talk to council members about the importance of hitting that date. And I believe that when we talk about priorities inside of our organization, we talk about priorities inside of the county, that ERP date is there. I think that part of my message is that it has to be clear we're making that date, right? We're doing this analysis as a CIO. That is something that, yes, I'll be public about that. I'll be forthright that we're looking at this, but that we cannot let that derail our ERP program, right? And that ERP piece of it is a part of those 100 days. So it's very perceptive that those could be conflicting, that could derail what we're doing. But the message is loud and clear to me, and that's the message I have to carry forward to the team. We are hitting that date. That January 1st for HCM, for payroll is our target, and we are hitting it.
Well, I'll give you a real easy one then. To follow on that, if you have two choices, hitting that date, or in the 100 days you find that this train is not on the right track, that date gets moved, which are your two options that you're going to fall on?
Well, so I don't want to be.
I don't perceive that you can't hit the date, but if that's the two options that you have are faced with in that 100 days, I just cannot help but think that people are going to say, wait a second, we got a new boss. Let's get it right as opposed to getting it on time. And
I think that's something where I would, how do I say this? I would be influential on that decision, but I think that's where we need to have transparency, right? As I learn these things, as we flesh some of these out and we say, you know what, we have a problem, right? And so that's something I bring to we didn't talk about this, but I bring to the governance, the executive committee, I bring to the project committee, and we get some clarity on, hey, here are your options, right? Because we're going to face that, Jack. We're going to face problems and we're going to face, our date's in jeopardy. Well, our primary goal is we have to protect that date. And at least what I'm going in thinking, we have to protect that date. But if that means, we have to lose this piece, right? We have to scale it back a little bit. What does that mean? Do we go forward? Do we bring in resources? What are our options to make the date? And if those options are so unsavory that we have to look at different things, what does that mean? What are our options? So Jack, I feel like I maybe avoided your question, but that would not be a decision I would make in a vacuum. That would be a decision that I have to get of that magnitude of potentially missing the date. That is something that we, as an administration and as a team have to be very transparent about.
Only comment, you said the executive committee. I am one that said, I'm believing that our fault on this project has been the executive committee making decisions as opposed to a true CIO who owns the project and has the guts to say, this is where we need to go.
I mentioned, Jack, that I'll have my flavor and I'll have my influence, and I will I will absolutely come with recommendations. But my experience has been that people want options, right? They want to understand, how did you arrive at your conclusion, right? Again, part of what I do and the way I operate is building that momentum and building that buy-in prior to a critical decision. And so I get it. It takes bold effort, and it takes someone standing up saying, this is how we're going to get there. Now, again, I can't do it alone, right? If I don't have that support, if I don't have that buy-in from the team, then we're lost. I'll use this word, it's incorrect. I'll have to lobby that team to get that buy-in, to have that, so that when we're faced with this, we understand how that decision was made and that we're all bought into that. So Jack, I appreciate it. I think I'm that guy that can stand up and make those bold decisions, but I can't make them in a vacuum. I need a team to support me, and I need you to support me. I need council to support me, right? I'll come with a recommendation. I'll come with options, but I need the support.
Leadership leads.
Mr. President, if I may.
Councilwoman, yes, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, Mr. Johnson. Good to see you. And I appreciate the time you spent answering a few questions earlier, but just to follow up on your presentation before we got started, the And to follow up on Councilman Schron's question, you're jumping in at a critical point, and we've had a lot of critical points, but you're jumping in at one where we are ready to launch the mini parallel, I think they call it. And it's going to be launched, if we stay according to schedule, July 4th. So that will happen unless, and that's of course within your 100 days, at the early stages of your 100 days. So is that something that you will allow to happen? And then after that, there's another parallel, and I think we have maybe 3 parallels before we actually launch in January. Where do you in your, as you analyze the ERP and what is doable and what isn't, how will you handle the first, because you're jumping right into a process that's in motion? What will you do with what's being done now? You're not going to put the brakes on and say, wait a minute, let me make sure this is the right thing to do. Or are you going to let it happen and follow the progress to see how successful it will be and will continue to be?
Yeah, so thank you, Nan. I appreciate the question. And let me first off say that my target start date isn't until actually the week after July 4th, so July 12th. So it'll be in motion a couple of weeks. So, but I think my answer would be the same, right? I am in no position right now to come in and dictate, put a stop on anything, right? To Jack's point, and to Dale's point, we've got this date, and it has absolutely been impressed upon me that hitting this date is absolutely critical. And I can't come in with a better plan at this point. But what I can do is be present, right? I can be present at these meetings, and I can be the guy that I think is lacking right now. I can be that guy that is breaking down barriers, that recognizes where there's roadblocks, but then can also, on the other hand, understand what's happening in the project. Is the vendor, is what they're saying make sense? Is our project team, is what they're doing make sense? I can get to that conclusion relatively quickly, but I can't stop the process right now, right? I can reinforce it and I can help that process, and we can course correct along the way. I've been brought into situations where we have significant date. Not to bore you with my history, but we had a significant, with my time at A. Schulman, a significant merger that had to happen with SAP into Infor in a very short time frame that I was brought into to help accelerate that, right? And so part of what I can do, at least I believe what I can do, is take what's good, what's working, what's in motion, and not disrupt that, tweak around the edges. Now, but having said that, I will say, if this is a disaster brewing, if there is something that is so far off the rails, I don't suspect that's the case, but if it is, I have to bubble that up, right? And we have to course correct. We have to be very transparent with the administration on what's happening there. So, Nan, to maybe directly answer your question, I have to let it roll as it is right now. I'm not in a position to change it, but it will be, again, message heard. ERP is priority 1.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I have 2 questions, so I'm going to limit it to just 2. So my second is the communication piece. So as you said earlier, we have Zig as our kind of go-between so that we can get a very specific overview as to what's happening and why more money is needed, why there are delays, what we should be asking, what we should be looking for, things like that. So how will you be communicating with us? Will you be the person instead of Jack answering the questions? Will you be giving us and reinforcing the monthly reports that Infor gives, and Jack tries to make sure that we understand what Infor is saying and adds his own comments? How will you be communicating with council so that we know, at least until payroll is launched and we know ERP is running well, and we don't have to be perhaps updated as often, but in the interim, how will you keep us informed?
Yeah, so my plan right now is that the buck stops with me on these things, right? So I will be the one that is communicating with you. I'll be on the front line. Now, I may have Jack, I may have Zig, backing me, because we may get into some details that I may not be 100% familiar with, but I own it, right? So the responsibility is with me, and my responsibility both to Armin, to Bill, it is me. And to council, I'll be the one, if Armin and Bill choose to have it run that way, I will absolutely be the one that's on the front line answering those questions. And I think that's part of my role, right? Is being, I understand ERP is on the forefront of minds, but there are other things, security, right? I have to be in communication with this group so then I can give you insight as to what's happening. I can make it into, sometimes I hear that you put the danger of putting a project manager or someone inside of a forum like this is they start talking projectese, right? They start throwing acronyms and they start throwing around these project management techniques, and the audience just understand what you're talking about. And I think that's part of my role, is to make sure that I'm being transparent, but I'm transparent in such a way that the audience, the stakeholders, you as the keyest of the stakeholders, understand what we're talking about. I've been on programs where PMs will come in and show to say an executive committee. They'll show all these stats and all these numbers, and they'll show you this and that and red, green, and yellow, and no one can make sense of it. And that's, I think, my role, is to make sure. Now, I'm a PMP, I'm a project manager by trade, so I understand those things. But I think part of my role is to make sure that it's transparent, it's understandable. And again, I think the buck stops with me, right? I'm the guy.
If I may follow up very briefly, Chair, I would ask, at least from where I'm sitting, that the monthly reports continue as they have been. They were lagging for quite a long time, where we may only get a report every 3 months or every 6 months, and get 6 months worth of monthly reports within one report. But we've been successful in getting those monthly reports. They've been very helpful. And the second request I would have is that you work with Zig, so that he doesn't feel as if he's an outsider and has to listen and not really have much input. If we depend on him quite a bit. So if we knew that you were both working together, I think that would be a collaborative relationship that would also drive success and have us know that things are moving positively.
So I know a little bit about Zig's background. We actually both were at that same firm I mentioned, Arthur Anderson, although I don't think our paths crossed. So absolutely, I think Zig is in a very unique position, can give me some really unbiased insight as to what's happened, the good and the bad, right? My hope is that we can, if some of what I've gathered is that there's this report, that goes out, and then, Jack may talk about it, others may talk about it, and then Zig comes along and he talks about it. And my initial reaction is, wow, that seemed really inefficient, really confusing to the council. And my hope is, we'll see if we can make this happen, is that we get Zig more in front of this, and we get Zig and Jack, and we produce one report that Jack supports, Zig supports, and I support. And then it's a much more concise method to get you the information that you need. Just an idea I'm toying with, but we'll see how that goes. But I feel for you that I feel terrible that the council now is becoming ERP experts. That should be not should be on your resume, but congratulations, you've got it now. But hopefully we can get that trust built where we can get this back to a little bit more of a normal relationship.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the time.
Thank you. So, Mr. Johnson, on several occasions, you just stated that you will be responsible, the buck stops with you. Is this something that you said to the administration, or if they have asked you to be the one where the buck stops?
That's an interesting question, but I don't think that I just sort of assumed it. No, that was really never asked. I will tell you that the administration has given me full control over the department, meaning, it's mine, right? And so, I'm not saying there will be, but there may be some adjustments that are made inside of that department, and we'll let the facts talk, right? We'll analyze the roles, we'll understand what an effective department looks like, and then we'll align personnel to those roles. So no, to answer your question, no, that wasn't a request, but I guess it was just an assumption that I had.
All right. I would say based on experience and the circumstances we find ourselves in, I would not think it's a unfair assumption. All right. I saw a hand. Did I see Councilwoman Conwell?
Yes, Mr. President. Through the president, I guess we're all hooked on the buck stops here, Mr. Johnson. How do you plan on using Jack as we go forward?
So Jack Ryan as the project manager.
Yes.
Yeah. So I've only had one initial conversation with Jack. Of course, Jack and I will be spending a tremendous amount of time as I get rolling here. I'll be relying heavily on Jack as well as Zig to bring me up to speed on where we're at. But you know, right now, I mean, I tend to let facts and information guide my decisions. And right now, I have to go in. We are, as Nan articulated, we are midstream with this. And, you know, I see Jack going in his current role as he is until I'm going to say this, I don't want it to sound like a threat, but, you know, I need to investigate. And if we see that roles aren't aligned properly, then we make adjustments. But my going in position is Jack is doing what Jack does. And, you know, we'll have a lot of conversation, as well as really, I could say that about anybody on the team, right? Right now, I'm not going in to disrupt, because disruption, that could really jeopardize the date. So, you know, we have to be careful. And you know, I read the papers, right? Jack's there's articles written about Jack that perhaps are quite unfair. And I need to work with him, and I need to understand. And my going in with anybody in the department is that, hey, we're going down the path until facts tell us to change. And we are analyzing, we are looking at everything, not just Jack's role. We're looking at every role every role, and then aligning personnel with the roles.
All right, Mr. Johnson, how will you measure success of this project?
Yeah, good question. And I think what that comes back to is looking at what are the objectives of this. And I don't know that right now, right? Is it a lot of time, well, we're installing an ERP. Well, yeah, you know, maybe you are, but there's got to be a business reason. This team and the administration back in the day went down this path with some clear objectives. Why did they want to install this? And I need to understand that, right? Is it because if we can get this payroll system implemented, then that makes our process much more efficient, right? We now can get payroll done rather than taking a week. We get it done in 3 days. This may make our purchasing. We can now turn around POs rather than take a week to turn around POs. It takes us a day to turn around POs. So I think we need to look at what are those objectives. And then we take a look at those objectives and we say, okay, how are we doing against those, right? Are we meeting those objectives? And what are we doing about it? And maybe I've been on programs too, where we've had to give up certain things as a date draws. Jack brought up this point. As we're driving towards a date, there may be some tough choices that we have to make. And those are things that I will give recommendations to, but I will present to you as to those recommendations. So measuring success, tough, right? But we should have very tactical, very numbers oriented reasons for even doing this in the first place. And that's what I think I measure against.
And just one follow-up, Council President. Mr. Johnson, is this the first time you've ever come into this type of system midstream?
No, it's a great question. And most of the time I'm brought into situations as a consultant where there is a problem. So I shouldn't say that, but I'm generally brought in when something isn't going according to plan. And sometimes those are very, very small things, but sometimes they're very large. I mentioned the integration that was happening at A. Schulman. That was something that was well down the path that I had to jump into the middle of. You know, in today, what my role right now, I was actually there at the start. So that was a little bit different, but dealing with problems is what I've spent a career doing. They're not easy, right? It's not easy. You guys are in a very tough spot. Jumping this, I fully realize what I'm up against. And yeah, it'll be challenging. If I were to sit here and say, oh, it's going to be easy, I know exactly what to do, I'd be lying. I don't know what to do in some cases. I need to get in there. I need to figure it out. But I do recognize where we're at in the program. And I've been there before, right? I've been there being brought in when there's a problem.
All right. And you're aware that we do have, finance and budgeting committee. They'll have you on there quite often to give that committee updates and things of that. Are you aware of that?
Yes, and I figured there was something similar in nature to that. And one of the things, particularly what I'm doing now with my role as vice president, is very concerned about the economics of a situation. And so, I'm going to go off of memory here, but I was brought in and we were saving, I think it was like $10 million in 2019 in my first go, and then 2020 we saved an additional $20 million. This year we're looking to save an additional $23 million. So economic prudence, economic respect, budgets are something that are very, very important to me. And I think that as moving forward as CIO, there is going to be plenty of opportunities where we can economize and we can look at where can we do things better, faster, cheaper, right? I know it's cliche to say, but that's I think that's I'm proving that on my current engagement.
So the lead for you would be not so much, well, make a choice. Is the lead for you if it needs additional money or getting the project done? Or which is your top priority?
Well, I think getting right. I understand the problems, right? The continually coming back to council of asking for money, and that is, you guys don't want to hear it, and I certainly don't want to come to it. So come to you with that. So as we're looking at what's in play right now, as we're looking at how this program is proceeding, one of what those analysis is how are we doing economically? Are our commercials, are our commitments, are we lining up with what we said we were going to do? And if not, again, I have to either, I have to be transparent about that. I have to come with solutions, but I have to make you aware that that's what's going on and give you options, right? Economically, we're running behind. Potentially, we have to look at making some changes. And again, Jack has mentioned about standing firm and being the guy. And I absolutely, and I know that's probably politically incorrect to say that, to be the person, right, that's on the front line. But I also have to keep you aware and have to get your buy-in.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Thank you, Council President.
You're welcome.
I have a question.
I asked one question, Councilman Simon, I'll get to you. You will be next. I did ask one question, so I will take my second question. Obviously, we know we are behind in our time. The cost has been incredible on this project, and we have certainly desired to hold to that deadline of January. So I appreciate that you're saying that you're coming into this. We want this deadline to be met. But in the back of my mind, I recognize the fact that as you bring your level of expertise and that you look at the project, I do feel that you're looking to hold to that first that deadline of January. But am I hearing you also say that, hey, if I go in here and I see an iceberg or I see something that requires, I don't know whether it be additional funding or something to hold to this line, are you giving yourself wiggle room that the timeline might be pushed back based strictly on the assessment of the project once you fully get in there?
Yes, that's a tough question, Mr. Jones, and I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, I think, there's got to be that opportunity where I present to you that if we have something that is like an iceberg coming at us, right, I have to take a look at that and I have to understand what is in the best interest of the county, from my view, right? Understand from my view, what is that best interest of the county? And hey, we've got something that's coming at us. It's not funded. And if we don't talk about this, we risk the date. And I can look at that, and depending on what those facts are, I may come to you and say, Mr. Jones, it pains me to say this, but I recommend that we come with $1 million, we're going to need $1 million in additional funding. I hate to do that. I'm motivated not to do that. So if that iceberg's coming at us, I'm looking at it saying, what can we do to avoid that iceberg without coming back and protecting that date? But again, I need to be transparent and let you know that that's coming. And if I make that decision, that recommendation to say, you know what, I think we can make the date, but we're giving up this, or we introduce this particular risk to the program. Maybe we make the date, but our go live has some problems. I need to be transparent about that. And maybe the way I view that risk is different than the way you would view that risk. And again, that's why I have you. That's why I look to you as that team to let's make that decision together. The little stuff, right? That's my job. I handle the little stuff. But the icebergs, I think that those are worthy of a conversation, worthy of a recommendation, but worthy of conversation.
Okay. All right, Councilwoman Simon.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I just want to say welcome and congratulations, Mr. Johnson. We appreciate you taking the time to be here. And actually, I think this is a breath of fresh air, especially when I heard you say that this is not an IT project. It was, that was really significant to hear. Can you elaborate on that, what you meant?
Yeah, and I'm glancing at my screen. I don't know if my picture is frozen to you, so I apologize if it is.
It is frozen.
Now, but
You're frozen.
all right, sorry about that. Hopefully it's a nice shot. It doesn't look very flattering, but flattering shots for me are tough. So what I mean by that is when many times, this isn't a council, and I don't even know that this is to be the case, but many times on what I see in general is that it becomes an IT responsibility to implement, whether it be a small program or a large program, right? IT people are geared for this kind of thing, right? And it looks to, say, someone in the procurement space or in the accounting space that, well, IT will implement this. And inevitably what happens is that either IT makes the decisions and they go in and it's wrong. It doesn't meet the business objectives. It doesn't meet the expectations of our key shareholders. It becomes IT making business decisions. And while IT can influence those business decisions, they're not privy to the information, to the pain that our more functional departments have. And so we need that engagement. We need that level of understanding from executives, from lieutenants, from department heads, to have skin in the game, to understand what we're trying to do and be able to make decisions that are going to, first of all, meet our objectives and enable those objectives, right? Again, if it's just thrown over the wall to IT and IT implements, you're going to have a disaster when you flip the switch, go live, right? And you may have a system that works perfectly, but it may not work the way that your payables department needs it to work, and it may not meet the objectives and may not solve any of the problems that the business has, which is why we did this whole program in the first place. So it's a common thing, unfortunately, but it's something that I'm very keen on looking at and making sure that it's not an IT project.
Yeah, thank you so much. From my standpoint, and clearly not an IT expert, but watching this unfold, I think this was a fatal flaw from the beginning, is not having at the top that understanding this is so much more than technology and IT, and even not understanding the accounting programs we were on or payroll, and trying to put something in place that the county wasn't even using. It's an operational way to handle that. So I think this is going to be a helpful, holistic way to adjust. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm very very excited for the opportunity.
Councilman Sweeney.
He's back
Mr.
for Sweeney.
Your
but no.
mute is on. You are
My
muted.
bad. Sorry about that. Mr. President, thank you for recognizing me. Mr. Johnson, welcome. Thank you for being here to talk about the importance of the job and what your qualifications are. I have a very simple question. You said the buck stops with you, but your reporting mechanism, who do you report to in regards to the structure of the county administration?
So I report to Bill Mason, as he's the chief of staff. So I will report to him, and then obviously Bill reports to Armin. So that is the structure. I think then, of course, maybe I invented the dotted line, but there's dotted lines all over the place, right? There's dotted lines, particularly to council. But officially I report to Bill Mason.
Thank you. I just wanted to understand. When you say the buck stops here, under your world, you take care of all the business, but you still have to report in that fashion. Exactly. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Welcome aboard, Mr. Johnson. You'll have my support.
Thank you very much.
Any further questions?
Mr. President.
All right, go right ahead, Councilman Miller. You will begin our second round.
Okay. My second round question is whether you plan to conduct an initial review of the Harris project in the same way that you're doing with the ERP project, and if so, how long do you expect that review to take?
So thank you for the question, Mr. Miller. And again, I plan on taking a look at any of the major programs. And there's probably other programs out there that I need to be aware of. You know, I'm not going to spend a ton of time diving into the minor ones, but the ERP, the Harris programs are significant programs that I will be taking a look at initially. And I outlined my methodology a little bit earlier. And that methodology will scales to whether they're small or whether they're large, but I will be following that methodology on both ERP and Harris. And I would anticipate that the timelines are going to be roughly the same. And now until I get in there and I see the complexities, or we may be adjusting that. And again, always having that look for icebergs. If I don't see a clear path to success, I'll be talking to the administration about this. I'll be talking to my peers about this on how do we get that clarity on a path to success. But I would anticipate it very similar to ERP.
So just as a matter of scope, the Harris project is smaller in size than the ERP by quite a bit, but the problems are probably almost as significant, so it deserves a close look. My second question is that, as you know, the county has been operating without a CIO for about 3 years, so other employees have had to help lead the department. My question is whether there are tasks or functions currently being performed by other employees that you will either take over or partially take over, allowing them to focus on a narrower set of priorities.
And Dale, the simple answer is yes, there are going to be things that current people are covering for that I will be taking over. I don't know exactly what those are at this point because I need to get in there and understand it, but that's all part of that 100-day plan. And when I talked about like the operational aspects of it, that's where that starts to bubble up. We start to understand. I think there was a question I saw regarding what's in the I'll call it the county charter, that may not be at the revised code, where it talked about it was delineated between, applications, certain groups of applications. There were 3, and then infrastructure. And I want to take a hard look at that because I think there's some improvement that can happen there. But to directly answer your question, Mr. Miller, there will be tasks that I'm sure are being covered that I will take over and allow the team to function. And probably even on the ERPs, there's things that Jack is probably doing that I can step in and help and allow him and that applications team to focus more on delivery, right? I can handle that, some of those more strategic, some of those more breaking down barriers, and get Jack and team back on, focused on delivery.
So I just want to thank you for your answers to the questions and say that I'm glad that you stepped up for this important role, and I look forward to working with you, and you have my support. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Miller.
Councilman Baker, whose hand did I see?
I have a question, if I may.
Yes, Councilwoman Baker.
Thank you. Just to follow up, I predict after hearing you this morning and some of the questions, I think you will find when you step in and analyze today what is going on, as we have been following it for the last several years, that we're at I guess what Zig would call a tipping point of stabilization, which we are told will take 6 months, and we're already a month into it, where we're pulling employees from implementation to stabilization. And then we're been delayed quite a bit, which is an understatement, but just recently on launching payroll, at least testing. So I think you're going to come into an environment that you may not feel is ideal. Like, we have too many people stabilizing, we have people that are trying to launch, we have payroll that looks really iffy, we have issues that need to be overcome. And for those reasons, perhaps put the brakes on. But I guess I would ask that, because we've worked so hard in getting to today, and even though the risks may be there, that we'll at least consider allowing the process to continue, even though it may not be the ideal environment that you would like to see when you're launching payroll, or you're trying to stabilize, or people are being pulled and and all these different things that we kind of lived through, that that it would be easy to stop it and say, nope, this is not how I would do it. And then perhaps delays us another 6 months, where maybe if we would have allowed it to continue, these risks would have been overcome through some more difficult times, but still done. So I guess I would ask if that would be in your wheelhouse, that you would go on with not a great way of moving forward, but a way of moving forward that is already in place, if you understand that.
I understand. And Nan, I think one of the things that I think that I can, how do I want to say this? So stepping back a bit, I mean, the default position is the route we're going right now, right? I can't come in at this point, day one, and make all this disruption, because all this disruption will probably guarantee that the January date isn't made. But what I can do is I can come in and see what process is in place. Some of it may not so good, as you mentioned, but if we can live with it, if we can make it work, but again, protecting that sanctity of the January go live is what my focus will be. And if it takes a major disruption to meet that January date, we'll do but I don't suspect that's the case, right? The default position is what we're doing right now. Going in and then understanding, hey, we may have to make a tweak here, we may have to make a change there. But if we do have to make a major move, then we make a major move. And again, I come to you with those options, I come to you with that recommendation.
Okay, I understand. And again, thank you for being here. Thank you for taking on the challenge, and look forward to your confirmation.
All right. Well, Mr. Johnson, you have, I believe you have read every article around the ERP that has been in the paper. I believe that's correct. And you've heard, I think I heard you use the word disaster is shared with you by some. With the challenge, well, certainly with the challenges that we know and are certainly well documented. Take a moment, tell me why you actually want the position.
So
I think when you saw those articles, I know they had to be already in your mind when you made your decision that you wanted to be a part of this body.
So you have asked me that when the article in Crain's or Cleveland.com hit, my cell phone blew up with colleagues saying, what's gone wrong? You know, what's wrong, right? Why are you doing this? And I think there's a couple things that come to mind. The first is, in my current role, right, we were looking at a European rollout, and that's our next phase. And while that may sound really glamorous to some, I'm at the point where that being in Europe half my life, it sounds great for a vacation, but it's not what I want to do. My kids are grown. My wife and I are finally having time to enjoy being together. We're enjoying exploring Northeast Ohio, and this is where I want to be. So that was the first thing that kind of caused me to even really start contemplating this thought. But then as it was one of the first ads that popped up when I went to Ladders or one of these sites. And I read it. Oh, wow, CIO, that sounds like a great career move for me. I read the ad. I was like, wow, I think these are things that I'm super interested in. Then I started reading more of some of the tabloid journalism that's out there. But what kept coming back to me was that the trials, the tribulations that I was hearing, I felt like I could help solve these problems. I hear a procurement, I hear an ERP, I hear a payroll. And these to me were tactical problems that I think these are areas that I can help solve. I may not know the answer going in, but I think I can study the facts. I think I'm good at understanding and reading the situation and helping resolve those. So that intrigued me. But maybe like a lot of you, right? A lot of you on this call could be doing other things, are doing other things, but there's a piece of you that likes that community spirit, that likes that civic duty, that gets value out of helping the community. I think I wouldn't say that's the predominant reason, but I think there's a part of me. And Pernell, I'm going to answer a question you didn't ask, but we talked about retention and how do we recruit? And I think that's something that while we can't compete with the Googles and we can't compete with Microsoft for talent, there's certainly an element of technical, qualified technical people that have that desire to do something more than make a profit, right? They have a desire to truly help a community. I think that's one of the areas that we play in. But I think all of you could be doing something else, right? You're qualified to be doing many other things. But there's a part of you that wants to be here, despite the failed ERP, despite the calls in the morning of from a constituent on why isn't my garbage picked up. There's a part of you that enjoys this, and it's something different for me. It's a new challenge. It's interesting. That's why I'm here.
I appreciate that, and you did anticipate my question. As you mentioned, tactically, you connect with our key vendors and partners, and again, holding them accountable to contracts. It does go right into our hiring and the retention rate. Maybe speak a little more on IT can be a high turnover position to begin with. Speak a little more about what you think you bring to the table that we might be able to mitigate that high turnover rate.
Yeah, and I think both the high turnover and the recruiting, they're not exactly the same, but they kind of go hand in hand. And that high turnover, right? Dale, I forgot who somebody mentioned that people are actually leaving for less money. And so that tells you there's something going on in the IT space that just isn't right. And so I think fostering that environment, again, where we have people that have clear direction, and I'm not saying that's not there now. I don't know if it is or isn't, but my suspicion is do they have clear direction? Are they being recognized for the achievements? I was asked a question about, well, what do you think about a county employee versus a private sector employee? Is there going to be a difference? And maybe, I don't know. I can tell you that the county employees that I've worked with throughout this process have been fantastic. They've been caring, they've been kind, they've been attentive. And so I kind of go into it thinking, well, people are the same. And I think that all employees, at least the ones that I value, are the ones that want to contribute, they want to do a good job, they want to meet the goals, and they want to be recognized for the achievements that they've made. And that's something that I would take a hard look. And maybe that's happening now. But maybe there's not the time. Maybe there isn't the time to devote to that. Maybe that isn't a priority. Maybe that isn't something that has been put forth as, hey, this is our department. This is what we value as a department. But those are some things that I'm going to institute. I know that we can't compete, and I don't pretend that we're going to be able to compete with the sexy technical job that you could get at Google or that you could get maybe in some of the private. But we can offer this ability to contribute to something that business isn't going to contribute. We can contribute to these social services that the county is providing. That is going to make an emotional connection in our recruitment, in our retention. And we have to make sure that those employees are taken care of and they're feeling valued, they're feeling like they're contributed, and that rolls into our recruitment effort. So anyway, I kind of mixed the two together. For now, I realize I did that, but I also think that they go hand in hand.
All right. Thank you. Councilman Strawn, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. One of the things you mentioned, Ron, was the cost justification analysis, and that you should be able to see some benefits. I think you mentioned like HR processing. Would it surprise you that we've been asking this question for years to try and find the cost justification analysis so we could see this, and we have yet to see it?
Yeah, that would surprise me. Would
a project like this start without that kind of analysis, that before you spend taxpayer money or your corporation's money, $25 million, you should say, where are we going to see the gain? What are the benefits? Where are we going to see process improvements? Are those questions that you would have expected on an ERP project before you went down a path?
Jack, in general, I feel like this is a little bit of a leading, but yes, you would. But I will say this too, Jack, that in my experience, there is some basic, plumbing, there is some basic house care that you need to do that are tough to show up as a financial benefit, right? Putting a new roof on the house, it's not something you enjoy doing, but you have to do it because the expectation there is that you'll have a functioning roof. And then sometimes in ERP, you have to do that because you just need your current system, and I don't know this to be the case, but your current system is so obsolete that it's no longer even functioning. And so sometimes you have to go forward, and that is one of your goals that is very tough to economically justify, but it's still something that needs to be done. Yeah, hey, I put a new roof on my house. Well, yeah, great. houses are supposed to have roofs, right? But you have to do those things. But I agree that there needs to be some measurable achievements on why you did this. We're going to do this. Now you can get rid of, the maintenance that we're paying on these obsolete systems. We can retire these systems that take 10 people to support, that takes vendors every time we have a problem. They charge us $400 an hour to come in and fix these. Those things you can start to quantify and talk about. All right, it may not in itself be cost justified, but it will reduce costs. It will reduce problems, and it'll make your life simpler. So I understand your question, and it does surprise me, but maybe that's something we need to really dig in on.
Anticipating that would be your answer. We do have the reality that we don't have these facts and information in hand, but we do have a PR problem that says that we've spent taxpayers' money. If we didn't have it beforehand, is it too late? And can we do it in such a way that we can at least come back after the fact and say, these are the gains we're going to now see? One of the things I've been suggesting is when we finally go live and we've got you're taking your breath, is to do an after action report where we actually do an in-depth dive and figure out where we went wrong, because we know full well that in 2 or 3 years, we're going to do an update on this CRP system. As I don't want to be shocked. There's going to be, this is not a one and done. This is a continual life experience. So I would love for us to do an after action and come back and at that time be able to do the cost justification that you're talking about, the cost savings. Is that possible?
Yeah. So Jack, I mean, you speak from experience, right? So yeah, you're dead on, man. Yeah. So we can go out there and we can identify benefits. There's people know what the benefits are. We probably just haven't done a good job of capturing those and putting those in something that's consumable by yourselves, that's consumable by the public. I'm fairly certain that when we go live January, we will see benefits. But to your point, one of the worries that I have in the back of my mind is this decision was made several years ago. We spent a long time getting this implemented. We're using a product that may not have been leading edge at the time. I'm to your point, we implement this thing. Are we already 10 years behind on our upgrade path, right? And so those are things that are going to be part of this analysis. We're going to look at what is this roadmap? What is the path that we are on? And oh my gosh, are we already we go live and we're already obsolete? I need to figure that, and I need to have a response. I need to understand what a go forward plan is, because you're right. And I think of security. I think of, okay, we've done all these great things in security around the infrastructure and employee awareness. But if we're sitting with our major system having vulnerabilities in it, and we can't close those vulnerabilities until we do an upgrade or until we go to the latest version, that's going to be some tough conversations we're going to have. And those are even be tougher when we go to our constituents and say, hey, I know we just spent all this money, but hey, guess what? We got to do it again, right? I get it. Tough. It's tough.
Well, I would love to hope that this at least puts us on a path to help identify the cybersecurity risks, because all you have to do is look around and see how many other cities, counties are being held ransom hostage, and we just cannot afford to have that happen. So I'm hoping that this will be an advantage when we get to this point, that we'll have put ourselves in a cybersecurity position to be better defending ourselves out there in that respect.
Jack, that's the thing. Again, I've said it before, I'll say it again. The ERP problem is solvable. We can fix that. It's tactics. We can get that done. It may not feel like it. It may not feel like but we can. The thing that keeps me awake at night is the cybersecurity, because it's the Pentagon gets hacked, right? I mean, I'm at companies where they get hacked, they get ransomware. And so we need to quickly understand now, and this would be a challenge, right? We can't be very public with this. We're going to have to figure out how we can tell the truth, but not expose our vulnerabilities to the world if there are any. But we have to understand where we're vulnerable. We have to work on what our mitigation plan is to close those vulnerabilities. But when the inevitable happens, when we get hacked and when we get a problem like that, how do we react to it? What is our business contingency? What are our hotspots? How do we go back and get a a backup, right? To get us back to pre-being hacked. How do we engage the FBI? How do we engage the authorities that have jurisdiction over this kind of thing? How do we get our insurance involved? Lots of things that we probably need some work on. And again, if one of these happens, ERP doesn't matter, because this will make headlines beyond, in my opinion, beyond anything, and it'll just be so bad for the citizens of Cuyahoga. We got to get our arms around that. And maybe we do. I'm not saying we don't. Maybe we do, but I need to get my arms around that.
It's one of my hopes that this is a tool that's going to help us at least protect and build a shield up for our cybersecurity, because that's the greater risk as I see it.
And Jack, I'm sure Jurgens, you see this. There are so many avenues into, how people can get in. I mean, it's just as we advance, as we intertwine, as we integrate, that just exponentially opens up the vulnerabilities. And we just have to make sure we've got a plan in place to mitigate this. We'll never solve it, but we need to mitigate it and have a plan.
Thank you.
Any further questions? No?
Just for curiosity, Ron, were you there at Tom Rudabaugh and Bob Hefner days at Anderson?
I don't recognize. By the way, I go by Andy, Jack, but so you may hear me called. My first name is Ronald. I don't know why my parents did it to me, but they named me Ronald, but call me Andy.
Okay, thanks, Andy.
In the old days, it wasn't a problem, but now with so many pieces of ID, are you Ronald? Are you Andy? Well, we're not really sure who you are, right? So anyway, I didn't recognize those names. So I was there like under Bob Lauer's administration. I don't know if you know Bob, but I think, like I said, Zig was there.
It was a great company at one point.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it could have been any of them, right? It's just the way the ball rolled.
All right. Are there any further questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Councilman Gallagher.
Mr. Johnson, I just want to thank you for coming out to meet with me yesterday. We went in depth on this situation and the overall running of the department. So I gave you what I had, and you still showed up today. So I can only wish you the best of luck, because the flame of the fire is about to hit your feet. So good luck.
Well, I appreciate the sentiments, and I appreciate the time that you spent with me. Yeah, and as I think about, you gave me a lot to think about as I walked away from there. And, I think I can only be who I am, right? And I can't wave a magic wand and make this thing go away. But what I can do is I can put some structure in. I can make people accountable. I can break down barriers, and I can be transparent. And I know what your position is on funding, and I absolutely appreciate that. And if I'm in your shoes, I absolutely may have the same outlook. And what all I can do is give you my recommendation, do my homework, and we have a discussion, right? I look to you guys as partners. I do that when I go to my, in the private sector, when I look at my executive team, when I look at the ELT, when I look at CEOs, right? They're partners in this, and that's all I can do with you.
Any further questions? Any questions? All right. Well, if not, well, Andy, I'll say this. One thing that you have said, of the many things you said, but the one thing that really resonated with me was that you used the word trust. In my profession, that is a word we use quite often, to be entrusted with our clients' most valuable possessions. And the world of IT is one where many eyes can glaze over when you start to discuss these things. But to bring the word trust in, and all that it means to me, as you said, transparency, communication, and just a higher level of professionalism when dealing with this type of subject matter, that meant a lot to me. So again, if there are no further questions, I ask from my colleagues a motion for second reading suspension, again, second reading adoption under suspension. Would someone like to?
So move.
Okay. Moved by Councilman Schron, and seconded by
second.
Councilwoman Simon. Yes. All right. Properly moved and
Sorry,
second.
I don't know.
Council President, before we continue, I would just like to state for the record that Ms. Conwell, Ms. Stevens, and for a moment, Ms. Brown was in attendance at this meeting.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, after being properly moved and second, is there any further discussion? If not, Andrea, let's have a roll call.
Yes, calling the roll, Ms. Baker, Mr. Miller,
Yes,
Mr.
My vote
Sweeney,
is a yes, clerk.
thank you, Mr. Tuma,
Yes.
Mr.
Mr. Sweeney was yes.
thank you, Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mr. Schwan,
Yes.
Ms. Conwell,
Yes.
Ms. Brown. Okay, Ms. Brown is absent. Ms. Stevens? Ms. Stevens? Okay. Ms. Simon?
Yes.
Council President Jones?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries and the item is approved to go forward to the full council.
Okay. All right.
Mr. President, I may need a little bit of a decipher there on what just happened, so I apologize.
All right. So we are in committee, and here's where we have rolled up our sleeves and done the hard work of discussing with you. And this body has at this moment recommended you for the position. And now we will come back to the full body at our next regular council meeting. And at that time, we will vote for passage, where you at that time would be, again, recommended to be the CIO, and the final vote will take place. So right now, this committee has recommended you for CIO.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to the council. I'm humbled, and I will do my best. Thank you.
All right, again, thank you very much. So now at this time, unless anything else holds our attention, is there any miscellaneous business? If not, all right, at this time, our meeting is adjourned, and we will look forward to seeing you at our next regular council meeting. Andrea, when is that?
That meeting will take place on Tuesday, July the 6th.
Tuesday, July 6th, and that would be at,
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
June
I'm sorry.
22nd.
Let me rephrase that. No, our next meeting is Tuesday, June 22nd at 2 p.m.
yeah.
And it's a virtual meeting.
See you then. All right, Andy, that is our
Sorry
time.
about
Thank
All
you.
right, great. And we have nothing else